Is the Bank of International Settlements any closer in issuing XRP as a tier 1 asset for the banking system? Jake Claver jumps in here, as well as I have a ton of research around this topic so you can really understand what's happening here. By the time you finish this video, you should have a good grasp about where we are heading with XRP and if it will get that tier 1 asset designation. Let's just jump right in.
We got Chris. He says,
Chris?
once fully adopted, is there a situation where politics can get involved and reverse all of XRP's momentum after price appreciation? Depends on, it's a good question. And it depends on who is the authority that implements it. I can tell you who I think is going to be the authority that implements it. And it is non-jurisdictional. It only takes one announcement from the BIS that this is their preferred third-party vendor or a tier 1 asset. Done. They make the decisions for all of the banks globally. And if they decide this is the one, and it's not Solana, and it's not Bitcoin, and it's not whatever else, and they say XRP is it, it's done. There's no politicking. There's no flopping it around, changing things. The IMF, the BIS, the UN, all of them will pile in on XRP. And every government will then pile in on XRP on top of that for their reserves. And now you're talking about like crazy demand. Been trying to tell you guys.
All right. Would it be higher than 50 or 100,000 per XRP? Man. All right. So let's understand what is currently a tier 1 asset so you can like get where we're going here. So examples of tier 1 assets right now are cash reserves, money held by banks for liquidity, central bank deposits, funds held by a central bank or with the central bank, high quality government bonds, sovereign debt, U.S. treasuries, physical gold, if allocated and directly held by the bank, and core equity, which is common stock, retained earnings, or certain non-cumulative preferred shares. Now, XRP is currently not recognized as a tier 1 asset by the Bank of International Settlements, or current banking regulations make this designation unlikely in the near future. For XRP to be classified as a tier 1 asset, it would require a significant changes to the BIS rules, as well as broad regulatory consensus, neither on which appears evident at this time. BIS criteria for tier 1 assets under Basel III and BIS definitions are highest quality capital for banks such as cash, central bank reserves, secure government bonds, and common equity. These assets share attributes of high liquidity, low risk, and reliable loss-absorbing capacity. Notably, physical gold was recently reclassified as a tier 1 asset based on its liquidity and universal settlement of trust. For XRP or any crypto asset to join this category, the BIS would need to revise its prudential standards and treat select digital assets on par with cash reserves, gold, and sovereign debt. Currently, BIS classifies unbacked cryptocurrencies, including XRP, Bitcoin, and Ethereum, as Group 2 assets due to their volatility and the lack of it backing. Banks may only maintain exposure to these assets up to 1% of their tier 1 capital, a rule set to take effect globally in January of 2026, so right around the corner. Here's Jake also talking about this in 2024, late 2024.
Imagine what could happen if XRP gets a tier 1 asset designation from the Bank of International Settlements. A tier 1 asset designation means the highest level of trust and liquidity in global finance. This status would allow XRP to be held as a core reserve asset by central banks, similar to gold and U.S. treasuries. With the tier 1 backing, XRP would not just be another cryptocurrency, it'd be a critical piece of the global financial system. The result, increased adoption, greater liquidity, and potentially massive price appreciation. The Bank of International Settlements plays a central role in setting global financial standards. And if they were to elevate XRP to tier 1 status, it would signal trust, regulatory acceptance, and broader usage in cross-border settlements. The implications of this move would be huge, potentially cementing XRP's place as a core piece of infrastructure in banking globally.
All right. And then also just to give you some perspective here, the team at Ripple look at some of the institutions that they have worked with and worked for Some of this is the White House. I got a better list here because it's hard to know all of these little pictures, right? Like, what are all of these things stand for? And so here is the complete list from Rosie Rios all the way down to Jess Chang. And here are the institutions that people at Ripple have worked for. Workle. And then here, of course, Ripple, U.S. Treasury Department, U.S. Federal Reserve, U.S. Department of Justice, State Department, Commerce, Federal Deposit Insurance, White House, U.S. President Seal, U.S. Department of Defense, U.S. Department of Interior, U.S. Department of Agriculture, SWIFT, International Monetary Fund, World Economic Forum, and the Bank of International Settlements. That was a juicy one. And there's a lot of people that believe XRP will be considered a tier 1 asset.